Thank you, Sally. That was great. I'm glad I gave you more time and didn't bother with a long introduction, but a very impressive background and impressive work. For our next conversation, we're pleased to welcome the newly approved members of the Arizona Space Commission. And this is really cool, that there's now a senior space commission. There's not very many places that have space commissions that can advise the state government on what's going on in space. And several of those commissioners are going to be here throughout the day, and they'll discuss their mandate. We also have a panel here, and I think, Brett, you're one of the key guys, so if I could invite the members of the Space Commission to come on up, and we'll have a cool conversation about what it does and what it can do and what it can do for all of us. Thank you.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Space Summit. I've got a great panel set up for you to start on the Space Commission. For those of you who don't know, I'm Brett Mecum. I run a government affairs firm here in Phoenix, but also was appointed to the newly created Arizona Space Commission. But we thought we'd have a really fun conversation, as General Warden mentioned to us, and I've got two commissioners up with me, as well as an aerospace lawyer. So I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves really quickly, and then I'm going to jump right into questions, and we can start on that end with you, General McGuire, and quick introduction.
Thanks, Brett. You guys hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. Mick McGuire, former Adjutant General of the Arizona National Guard, 35-year Air Force officer. They made a myriad of clerical errors, promoted me to 2-star, but my primary specialty was making the trees big and small in the F-16. And I was appointed just recently by Governor Hobbs to be one of the inaugural members of the Space Commission. I look forward to our discussion today. Thank you.
Your service, Mick. Shruti Gurudanti. I am the odd one out here. I'm the aerospace attorney. I am a partner and director of the Space Law Department at the Rose Law Group. I've been practicing with defense contractors, aerospace companies for over a decade, and it's really a privilege and an honor to share space with the amazing folks here on the stage today. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Lisa Morris from Virgin Galactic. I'm their vice president for supply chain, so a little bit off from a technology standpoint, not quite into the law area. Been with Virgin Galactic for almost 4 years now, and in the aerospace industry for almost 20. So really excited about being a part of the Arizona Space Commission and bringing all of the things that Virgin Galactic's doing to all of you.
Great, and welcome all. So let's first talk a little bit about how Arizona's space sector is actually taking off, launching, so to speak. We're going to have a lot of those puns today. But can each of you kind of share with me your thoughts? What makes Arizona unique from a space perspective, whether it's maybe talent or infrastructure, maybe some of the partnerships? What's it really doing to position itself as a leader in the space economy? And whoever wants to jump in on that one.
Well, I'll give you my perspective about where Arizona is and why this commission matters. If you look at where we are today in the defense and commercial space, the formation of the Space Force, how there's an inexorable link between NASA, the Department of Defense, and industry in what is clearly a nationally mandated requirement to commercialize, defend, and explore space. In that setup here in the United States, I would say that Arizona needs to capitalize on the fact that 83% of our land is in public hands, either state or federal, and utilize that to explain to the legislators in other states and around the nation that this is the place to do that, because as much as we love Florida and California and Texas and Alabama and Colorado, those 5 states, I would say, are the leaders in space right now that we're chasing. Humans are terrestrial creatures, and we're not going to live underwater. And so ultimately, we're going to have to figure out how to get people away from the land and back to the land. and you got to have land that no one has private property rights to. So it's not going to happen east of the Mississippi. And ultimately, a thinking business person would figure out how to leverage the capability you have in the open spaces in Arizona to do that kind of test and development and ultimately exploration, colonization, whatever's going to happen out there in the next 50 years.
Thanks, General. Lisa, you want to jump in real quick?
Absolutely. So Virgin Galactic chose to come to Mesa, Arizona. Particularly this state did a fantastic job bringing us here and making it very open for us. What we came here for is really the infrastructure and also the talent. There is quite a bit of talent here, a lot of university interaction with industry, and so we were looking for making sure we had a workforce for the future and one that could handle high-tech, cutting-edge information. So really excited to be a part of this state and to expand our business here and build spaceships in your backyard.
Great. Shruti, what's the lawyer's perspective?
Yeah, I think to Mick's point, I do agree that Arizona has a lot that is going for it. However, we're not capitalizing on the way we ought to. From a legal perspective, I think we're a very business-friendly environment. Our corporate laws are pretty standardized. There is really a very good conflict resolution process here in Arizona. And so we do have the infrastructure, to Lisa's point, to really attract companies here. My take is, and I think yesterday someone at the luncheon also said this, more than anything, I think Arizona has a very friendly and supportive business ecosystem. We have a very good environment that supports startups, and I feel like I was an immigrant and I landed in Arizona, and everyone's been really friendly, and I think that's something that is really unique to us. People are always open to help, and they want to help companies do better, which is unique as compared to your Silicon Valley or New York and things like that, which enables these companies to really grow and scale to the level that they should. I think that's something very uniquely Arizona.
Thanks so much. Lisa, I'm going to throw a question over to you. And first of all, Virgin Galactic, welcome to Arizona. Building all of the Delta spaceships here is a huge feat. So welcome. I think we ought to give Virgin a big hand for locating here. So since you're in kind of the supply chain operations at Virgin, and you've got really a front row seat, so to speak, to the commercial space boom. How can the Arizona Space Commission, as a commissioner, help companies like Virgin maybe streamline supply chains, work with workforce development, and then also I just kind of interested to hear from you, what's kind of one gap you see that kind of needs to be filled in the state as well?
Certainly. So when I look at the whole space industry and moving into commercial space for Virgin Galactic, it's kind of an exciting piece there. And as much as it's new and groundbreaking, we're also using a lot of existing technology. So we are a horizontal launch system. So our vehicle launches from about 50,000 feet. You take off the ground, have a nice ride up to about 50,000 feet, and we drop the spaceship, and then she takes you to suborbital space. So when I think about all of those pieces and look back, it's not your typical 1960s rocket that we're putting up. And from a supply chain standpoint, everybody sees, the big vehicles, the rockets, all of the big pieces there. As a supply chain leader, I look at it and I see valves, I see tubes, I see titanium, I see aluminum, 3D printing. So it's just a conglomeration of parts, wire harnesses, you name it. And so when I think of what we can do in Arizona to make that dream real, it's not always focusing on the big rocket, on the launch system, on the launch pad, on the mission systems, right? It's about all of those components and bringing that together to enable us to go to space, to enable new companies, startups, to enable some of the existing that have been around for a long time to make all of this possible. So it's really about forming that community that comes together and enables all of us to go to space. And it's having a valve supplier down the road, an actuation supplier down the road, avionics, and we've got a tremendous amount of technology and industry in this state already that just needs to be tapped, needs to be brought together. And there's a lot of companies that are doing very similar things that just need to talk get them in the same room. And if you've got that kind of a base of industry to draw from, it's going to bring bigger space companies here because they can operate here. Their suppliers are right next door. You've got that built-up infrastructure. So we may not be a space coast, but without the state and what happens in the state from a technology and production standpoint, Space Coast is just a coastline. All of your systems, Honeywell, Raytheon, Northrop, Boeing, everybody's in this state. And if we could draw them together, imagine the power that we can command to really enable space to grow.
Thanks for that answer, Lisa. Do General or Shruti, do you guys have any quick comments on that? Nope.
No, I agree. We have no water attached to Arizona right now. Ultimately, that matters less to me than the fact that we have a huge untapped resource, for example, at Yuma Proving Ground, with thousands and thousands of acres of area where we've tested precision indirect fire, long-range munitions, and the rest. Why can't we do the same thing with rockets?
That's a great point, sir. And might as well keep the microphone there because the next question I'm directing to you. So, General, and we can't not talk about space and national security defense without a former two-star general on the stage. So, Space Force, newest branch of the military. When you were the tag of the Arizona National Guard, you were responsible for Arizona's defense and so forth. From your vantage point, how can the Space Commission align commercial space growth with the national security needs? And what do you think is a win-win opportunity for both?
Well, I like to try to keep it local, so I'll use this analogy in Arizona. If you look at what happened post-World War II with the growth of fixed-wing and rotary-wing aviation, Arizona was at ground zero for that. We'll call it the Goldwater years from 50 to 75. We took the lead in seizing the initiative to use our airspace and space on the ground to test fixed-wing, rotary-wing, partnered with California and the guys out at China Lake. That needs to happen now. Bluntly, as a guy that served as a cabinet secretary for Governor Brewer and Governor Ducey, and worked with all of our congressional delegates, on the political side, we have rested on our laurels too much. We have not moved forward, and those other states have passed us. It's not to imply that they're better. I think we have better business opportunities, we have better land rights, we have better opportunities, but it doesn't do any good if you don't act on it. On the defense side, what I will tell you is, I don't know how many of you keep up with the current activities of DOGE and the budget realignment in D.C., but Friday was the suspense for the Department of Defense to submit their bogey for an 8% cut from their TOA, their baseline budget, which last year was $890 billion, so about $80 billion is going to come out of the program of record. There are now 5 separate services that have budgetary authority. The Space Force, the most newly formed DOD only, excluding the Coast Guard because they're dual-hatted, had the lowest cut, which was only 1%. So if you're in the business, academia, education space, they're taking a haircut, but relative to what the Army is taking 18%, there's going to be higher probability that programs of record that are tied to Space Force exploration and the things that you talk about will be funded in the next 3 years, much higher than even the Air Force, the Navy, the Marine Corps, or the Army. I say that as an Air Force Academy graduate, and it heartens me that we have a Secretary of the Air and Space Force. I will say, as a guy who also served in the active component and then in the National Guard, which derives its authority through the originalist version of the Constitution, that we will raise an Army and maintain a Navy, that while the Air Force is a platform-based service, as is the Space Force, thank God we divorced the Army in 1947, and so for the lawyers in here, common law interpretation will always trace authority to the Air and Space Force back to the Army. So that gives you an opportunity in a landlocked state that you wouldn't otherwise have if, God forbid, they ever rule that, well, this is only a federal mission and there's no states' rights tied to it. So just want you to think about how I extrapolate back to what will matter in Arizona. And those personnel, I agree with the comment about the workforce development. We have one of the youngest states in the nation. 1 million of our citizens are under the age of 25. And truthfully, I'm a late adapter. You know, I'm 60. I don't see myself living on Mars. I may send somebody there, but somebody may. And they're probably far younger than even the age of 18 today. And many of the states I mentioned, California, Alabama, and Colorado, are going in the other direction relative to their demographics. So all of these things line up for us, but bluntly, we got to be better. I mean, we can't blame nobody to blame but Arizona if we don't win this race, because in a fair fight, we win every time. I tell people from other states, don't hate me because I'm beautiful. It's just a reality. Right? So that's what I think about how this works. And the inexorable tie between DOD, NASA, and the private industry, look, there will be no research at ASU or U of A if DARPA and DOD doesn't believe there's a mission here, because we're not sending, Corporation X to Mars as the first group. There may come the point that happens, but just like in aviation, it's going to be a federally funded collective effort to get there. And then what happens is we branch out into commercial industry will happen 10, 15, 30 years down the road.
Thanks for that, General. That was a really great explanation. I don't know if either two panelists want to weigh in real quick before I move to the next question.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of the comments being made, I think one of the negatives that we have in Arizona is, as a state, we are not able to provide a lot of tax incentives, which Florida and some of the other states are able to. It is in our Constitution that we are not able to gift things, and that prohibits companies from getting these big tax breaks. That said, that is not a deterrent. We have so many other factors going for us, including all of the things that were said here, which we are not optimally leveraging. So if anyone makes the argument that, oh, you're not giving the tax credits, I think that just is a valid argument at all.
And well pointed, because there's lots of tools that can be used to bring companies here. And I think you see companies like Virgin, companies like Black Star Orbital that have chosen to locate to Arizona because of the environment here. Let's talk a little law. You want to talk a little law about what we can do in law? Okay, we're going to talk a little law. I'm a big Suits fan, by the way. Love Harvey Specter. So you've guided a lot of space deals over at Rose Law Group. Obviously, that deals a lot of technical things, regulation, innovation. But what are the legal and policy frameworks, if you were to give some advice to the commissioners? Should we be prioritizing on the commission? What's it going to do to, as to piggyback on what you just said, make Arizona a magnet for commercial space companies? I mean, is that going to be launch permits? You just addressed some of the tax incentives, partnerships. What do you think makes sense from where you sit?
Yeah, so, okay, I don't know. This might be controversial, but if you're ready for it. I think we have all of the elements to become the space-related conflict resolution tribunal. So what I mean by that is, if the commission were to create the first and, probably the world's first and most exclusive space resolution or space conflict resolution tribunal, call it whatever you want. I'm sure you can come up with a good acronym. But there is really no space-specific arbitration panel tribunal anywhere in the world. But we have similar things for maritime, for intellectual property, and WTO, so on and so forth. I think Arizona can become that and help bring a lot of these disputes here, because we have, the ASUs and the subject matter experts who can be arbitrators and help resolve these disputes. There's so much of uncharted territory when it comes to space law that if we can become the place where folks come to resolve their disputes, that's huge. Then you have contracts being drafted with Arizona law, with dispute resolutions being resolved in Phoenix or Tucson or wherever. And it's a great way for us to position ourselves as a leader in this space, as a thought leader, just like Delaware is for corporations. I think Arizona absolutely can become the space law leader and help companies resolve big disputes. Space debris is a big problem right now. I think it's an increasingly bigger problem every single day. If Arizona can figure out, okay, we're going to have liability, resolutions happen here. We're going to change our laws on how insurance policies and liabilities are looked at. I think, again, we would really attract a lot of companies to come to Arizona, use Arizona law, and really help our economy.
That's really a bold idea, and we definitely should talk. A space lawyer and a space lobbyist, we could probably figure something out.
Let's do it.
Mick and Lisa, any quick comments on that?
I think it actually is very novel approach and something we can learn from that. When you bring in folks from other disciplines outside of technology, aerospace, that's where you really find some gold, and that idea is one of those.
Okay, we're going to go back to all of you just to kind of go through. I've got about 2 questions left and about just under 10 minutes, and then we're going to open the floor for a couple of audience questions if we have time. Thinking about the summit, and this is really the roadmap for space policy in Arizona, from each of your perspectives, what do you think is really one bold goal, and obviously we just heard your bold goal, but one bold goal the Space Commission should set for the next 5 years to really turbocharge our commercial space sector? And then how do you think that would ripple across the state's both local economy and our global reputation? And whoever wants to jump in first.
I think we need to go out somewhere in western Arizona, southwestern Arizona, and set up some kind of launch and recovery facility that has both FAA and DoD approval to do testing. If we can do that in the next 5 years, then you can bring people in. But Florida, Texas, California are out ahead of us in all that.
I second that.
Okay.
So I'll go a different place. Kind of to foot stomp what I said earlier about creating the community around us. I think if we want to increase the revenue in our state and increase our workforce, increase investment here, we create an arena or a community, industry community that supports space operations. And we've got a lot of that technology already here, but I think there's some areas that we can grow in bringing in that supply chain, bringing in that technology, building upon some of the investments in research that's already here, building upon what we're doing, in Tucson for all of the optics and telescopes, and bringing that out to the world and being a little less humble and shy about it, and kind of more of the screaming from the rooftops, but creating a space that industries want to go to because the infrastructure is already there. When we think about a startup business, we lean on that infrastructure and pull from it. There's over 100 years of aviation history that we need to draw from, and all of the history that's here in Arizona regarding the telescope operations, regarding what's happened over the years at Davis Month and the growth there. My grandfather was actually a test pilot out at Davis Month, and so a lot of history and background that we can bring into space, and we're right now so quiet about it. So it's in the next 5 years, it would be great to be on the tip of the tongue of everyone who's talking about space and what we're doing in Arizona and how you can come here and draw from that community to become bigger than you are yourself.
Okay, I have one final question, kind of a lightning round, but we just talked about the 5-year plan. But we're all here today. Commission is about to get stood up. We're going to have our next meeting our first meeting in a couple of weeks, rather. But what's really one step Arizona and the commission can take this year, right now, before year end, to really solidify our place as a commercial space hub and start moving in the direction of some of the recommendations we just talked about for the next 5 years?
I'll go first on this one. When I think about what we can do in 2025, given that we've got about 7 months left to get there, is pulling together industry for like an industry event, industry week, to draw those folks together and do 2 things. 1, connect the dots and bring them together and have them talk at a table. But 2, draw from them what do they see as what's needed in this state to take that next step. And that'll help us draw in our focus and determine, are we going to be satellite? Are we going to be optics? Are we going to be launch? Are we, focusing in on tier 1 systems to support space, whether that's, environmental or health-wise? Who do we want to be in space? Because it's such a large arena that I think if we don't focus in on what we're going to do and determine that this year, it'll be too many priorities and too spread out, and we won't take that edge or make that difference and get out in front. So I think this year has to be bring who we have together already in the state that has already invested in here and talk to them about how to grow and then where to focus.
I love that. I tend to go back to my legal background, but I wonder if there's a way to create a one-stop shop resource booklet, database, one-pager, something that talks about all of the regulatory or steps or licenses that a company ought to take before they launch or before they do a test. And I know that there are other states that have this one-stop shop resource database. I think that would be immensely helpful for a lot of new companies to just understand what they have to deal with before they can, start all of the other steps that are needed for phase 2.
General?
Yeah, I would say it's about, if you look at a one-year goal, it's got to be a communication strategy. You have to start talking about the fact that, one, we're in the race. 2, this is the place that will win the race. And 3, start knitting together the history of Arizona and how we got to where we were in fixed-wing air-breathing assets and how we can link that to exo-atmospheric space assets. Kind of the legal analogy, you got the law on your side, pound the law. You got the facts on your side, pound the facts. You got nothing, you pound the table. We got the law and the facts on our side. We need to be more vocal about getting in the race. And there's reluctance, bluntly. Politically, there's reluctance. I mean, Alabama and Colorado are at war with each other right now, in case you're wondering. And if you decide to jump into a shooting war, there's people going to shoot back. But the only way you get into it is to declare that you're willing to jump into this fight. If we're not willing to do that as a commission and a state, we're not going to win, because you're not going to be able to gain the patriotic and political capital of this great state. But how do you do it? 1 out of 7 voters in this state's either a veteran or currently serving. This is the biggest constituency in the state. So if they like, hey man, we're in, you're going to get a lot of support. If you don't do that, no one will know.
Great answers all. I've got about 3 minutes left for a couple of audience questions quickly. So who got a lot of hands? I see Kit back there. I'm gonna call on him.
Thank you. There's been a lot. I'm Kit with Black Star Orbital. So there's been a lot of talk about kind of the vertically integrated space economy in Arizona, being able to do, launch in Yuma, landing in Sierra Vista. We're going to have a spaceport. How is the commission going to leverage these assets moving into that 5-year plan? How do you leverage that spaceport? How do you leverage those things to not just incentivize business to be here, but also we're pushing that money back into the economy. We've got to create the virtuous cycle, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. Who wants to dive into that one?
So I think it starts with the communication plan, as Mark was noting, that we start bringing folks together to talk about it. Because right now it's like, shh, Arizona has a spaceport. Like, we got to stop that. We need to be screaming it from the rooftops. And not only that, but bringing things together. And that's that connecting the dots pieces of what else is happening here. Who's going from the West Coast to the East Coast to launch? Let's talk to them. Talk about what we have, the advantages, what's available to them. But it's bringing that together and starting off with that communication piece and then building from there. And I don't think that we know today where we can go necessarily. We have dreams. But once we start talking to people, that'll start becoming concrete.
You made the comment about vertically integrated companies. I think the biggest advantage that we have as well is the number of subcontractors and the way there's going to have to be teaming agreements realigned. If you go back to when I started as a cadet at the Air Force Academy, there were 12 original equipment manufacturers producing aircraft in the United States Air Force inventory. Today, there are essentially 2. We're at the same place in space where you have all kinds of different companies that say they do space, but there are going to be winners and losers in these OEM mergers and acquisitions, and we need to make sure that they know this is a place where you can access all of these subcontractors to do that. That's why, for a CEO of a business, I'd say, how many people that are working at Boeing Mesa right now with the 570 subcontractors that are Arizona-based for the Apache would have a capability to tag on to a space program if Boeing came here? That's what I would tell the CEO of Boeing.
Great. We have a couple of sites. You want to weigh in real quick, and then we're going to wrap the panel?
I feel like sometimes folks like ASU, U of A for sure, and I'm a U of A alumni, and it pains me to say that, but ASU could really help connect these dots in a lot of ways, but I'm not really sure if that's currently happening. I know U of A is not doing it, and I wish they did, but, you know.
Well, great. We're ramp. Unfortunately, we're over time, and Jessica
Whoever's
will
next, you
shoot
just
me.
lost 2 seconds.
That's okay.
4 seconds.
Yeah, unfortunately, but I think some of us are going to be around the rest of the day, so if you didn't get your question answered, feel free to come up to any of us and talk about it. But I think right now I'm supposed to hand this back to General Warden, but I really want to thank my 3 panelists today. I think this was a great discussion, and thanks for taking time to do this today.